fights. And later on, that continued to adapt and changed according to our needs, to where more advanced apes, like chimps, don't necessarily always have a power-driven society so much as they do a respect-driven hierarchy, which is really, really interesting. And Franz de Waal talks about how that the alpha male oftentimes is not determined by who's the biggest and who's the baddest, but by who is most able to mediate conflict. Who is the one that people respect the most? Who is the one that has the greatest capacity for fairness, for justice, for equity, and is able to put down fights? Meaning that oftentimes he observed the leaders, the top tier of this hierarchy, getting in between two parties that are fighting and literally physically separating them with his arms. And if one of them had a rock or a stone or a stick, which does happen, and it's going to use that as a weapon against another one, that alpha male will actually take that from that assailant. So his point from that being is that, if that's how you work your way up in a hierarchy, and the point of a hierarchy, at least from the male's perspective, is what? It's reproductive rights. Mm-hmm. That he wants to increase his ability to have more mates. So the one that has the greatest capacity for fairness and equity and justice is the one that is ending up reproducing the most. Which you can see how those could be the beginning roots of a very moral society. A society or a group or species that really has a deep capacity to be able to understand right and wrong, be able to understand how to deal with conflict, to be able to be moral, to be able to be nice. And I think that has been true for us for a really, really long time, where it's not just the most muscular chimp that's leading, it's the one that the most people respect. And that's true with humans too. I mean, look at our leaders. It's not, who can beat up who, but it's, do I respect this person? And those things get selected for in those groups. So I find that endlessly fascinating, and I think has played a factor in our becoming nice, so to speak. Another awesome video, allow me to find.
A pot of hazelnuts, and the flint that's needed to open the lid. You need both to get a nut, but they're separated by a see-through barrier. Vulcan has the rock, but can't reach the nuts. Virgil has the nuts, but knows he can't eat them without a rock. Vulcan quickly offers the tool. He must hope Virgil is smart enough to open the lid and fair enough to cut him in on the spoils. Virgil is struggling. He doesn't have his friend's skill. And Vulcan is getting impatient. The flint is finally through the lid, but can Virgil be trusted to share the nuts? With Vulcan out of reach, it must be tempting to take the lot. Three nuts, a fair share. Vulcan and Virgil have used teamwork to beat the system. But can Capuchins really have a sense of fair play? Ted gives Vulcan a white chip which can be exchanged for food, in this case a dried biscuit. An identical token for Virgil, but in return he gets a juicy grape, a far better exchange. Virgil is back for seconds, but this time Vulcan sees him get the grape. He now expects one too. Biscuit? That's not fair. Virgil's back again. Another grape. Vulcan is losing his composure. This injustice is too much. He was happy with biscuit, but that was before Virgil got grapes. Now he'd sooner have nothing than be shortchanged. It's a point of principle. Virgil returns, so Vulcan suspects Ted of readying another grape. It must be in there somewhere. At last, a succulent grape.
So how does that develop biologically? Thoughts? I haven't had any good discussion. So how does a species develop that kind of sense of right and wrong when it comes to fairness, when it comes to what's being given to another?
In that first sequence, did the monkey routinely in repeated trials give more of the nuts to the monkey that handed them?
No, that's a really interesting question. The fact that he gave them 3 out of 5. Yeah, it definitely shows that he really wants to think that other monkey really has some kind of vested interest. I found that really interesting. So, within species, that's called reciprocal altruism, where it's basically the idea of you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back, and that's something that's very human. We certainly understand that. It's hard to find that in species, though. It's a great idea in theory, but we see it in things like we talked about last week with vampire bats, and some in certain species of monkeys and apes. But it's difficult because it's so cognitively complex. It seems simple, but you have to be able to recognize parties that are on your side and will be, like we did last week, they will deal with you justly when it comes to the prisoner's dilemma, that if you do something good for them, they're going to do something good in exchange. So it takes recognition, it takes memory, and it takes a kind of a long-sightedness about your actions. So it's complex, so you only see it later on in evolution. And the next one that I wanted to talk about is give a little. Let's see if I can. These are my nieces. A couple people in this room know who these beautiful, beautiful girls are. Marina, Jelena, and Clarissa, from right to left. Marina's 2. Help me out on count.
2, 4, 6.
2, 4, and 6. That's what I thought. I wanted to say wrong one. So I thought it was 2, 4, and 5. But here's the experiment that I did with them that my sister is unaware of, and it shows. Well, I'll tell you what it shows afterwards. But here's the experiment. You have this box of crayons, and you have this stuffed animal, little bunny Fufu is what we had. This little stuffed rabbit. And first you introduce the rabbit. Hey, Marina, I want you to introduce you to my friend. This is little bunny Fufu. And he's gonna go away for a minute, but we're gonna